In 1983, the black child poverty rate hit 46%, nearly half. A woman in Birmingham was feeding 4 children on $11 a week, and she was not failing. She was engineering. Number 7 on this list was so filling that one grandmother in Memphis served it every Sunday for 22 years straight, and her grandchildren still request it at family reunions today. Number 3, costs less than $2 and contains a nutritional profile that modern dietitians now call nearly perfect. These 25 meals did not come from cookbooks. They came from necessity, memory, and a kind of genius that poverty forces out of people. Hi, my name is Joseph, and this is Forgotten Old American. Number 25. Fried bologna sandwiches. A pack of bologna cost 69 cents in 1982. A loaf of bread was 80 cents. You dropped a slice into a dry skillet, watched the edges curl up into a perfect bowl shape, and flipped it once. The center blistered and browned. You put it on bread with yellow mustard and maybe a slice of government cheese if you had it. Children across the South ate this for lunch 5 days a week, and they thought they were eating well. They were not wrong. It was hot, filling, and it tasted like someone had taken the time to cook it. That mattered more than people realize. Number 24. Neckbones and rice. Neckbones were the cut the butcher barely charged for, because nobody with options wanted them. Black grandmothers knew better. You seasoned those bones with garlic powder, onion powder, black pepper, and salt, browned them in a heavy pot, added water and a sliced onion, and let them simmer for 2 hours until the meat pulled away and the broth turned deep, dark, and extraordinary. Poured over white rice, it was a complete meal. The collagen from the bones thickened the gravy into something that coated every grain. A pound of neck bones cost 30 cents. 2 pounds fed a family of 5. Number 23. Cornbread and buttermilk. This one is so old it connects directly back through slavery and Reconstruction and every hard decade in between. You crumbled leftover cornbread into a tall glass of cold buttermilk and ate it with a spoon. Some people ate it warm, some ate it cold, straight from the refrigerator at 11 at night, while the rest of the house slept. The buttermilk softened the cornbread into something almost like porridge. The sourness balanced the faint sweetness of the corn. A quart of buttermilk cost 49 cents. The cornbread was already there from dinner. This was not a recipe. This was a tradition that stretched back further than anyone could trace. Number 22. Pinto beans with fatback. You soaked a pound of dried pinto beans overnight, then dropped them into a pot with a slab of fatback or a ham hock, added an onion, salt, and enough water to cover everything by 3 inches and let it cook on low for 4 hours while you did everything else that needed doing. The beans turned creamy and thick. The fatback dissolved into the broth, leaving smokiness behind. A pound of dried pintos cost 49 cents in 1983. It fed a family for 2 days. Served with cornbread and a raw onion on the side, this was the meal that meant the first of the month had come and someone had been to the store. Number 21st. Salt fish and grits. Salt cod or salt herring. Packed in wooden boxes and sold cheap because it required preparation most modern cooks no longer wanted to bother with. You soaked the fish overnight to pull the salt out, then fried it in a skillet with onions and a little oil. Meanwhile, the grits cooked low and slow in salted water until they thickened into something creamy and substantial. Together on a plate, the sharp brine of the fish against the mild warmth of the grits created a combination that had fed black families in the coastal South since before anyone alive could remember. Humble on paper, extraordinary on a plate. Number 20. Chicken feet soup. Before you scroll past, listen. Chicken feet were 10 cents a pound in most southern markets in 1982 because the mainstream grocery customer did not know what to do with them. Black grandmothers knew exactly what to do. You cleaned them, clipped the nails, blanched them, then simmered them for 3 hours with onion, celery, garlic, and a bay leaf. The collagen in the feet turned the broth into something that almost gelled when it cooled. Thick, golden, deeply savory. Modern restaurants now sell bone broth made this exact way for $9 a cup and call it a wellness product. Your grandmother called it Tuesday. Number 19. Fried potatoes and onions. 3 potatoes, sliced thin. 1 onion, sliced thin. A cast iron skillet with a little oil or bacon grease. Salt, pepper, and patience. You cook them low and slow, turning occasionally, until the potatoes crisped at the edges and the onions went sweet and almost caramelized. That was supper, not a side dish. Supper. For a family stretched to the absolute limit of the grocery budget, a 5-pound bag of potatoes at 69 cents was mathematics that worked. Some families cracked 2 eggs into the pan at the end and scrambled everything together. That was the deluxe version. Nobody was complaining. Number 18. Cracklin cornbread. When you rendered lard from pork fat, the crispy browned bits left behind were called cracklins. They cost almost nothing and tasted like concentrated pork, smoke, and salt. You folded them into your cornbread batter before baking, and what came out of that cast iron skillet was something so far beyond plain cornbread that the two should not share a name. The fat from the cracklins kept the bread moist. The little crispy pockets distributed through every slice gave you something to chew into. Church mothers brought this to repast dinners across the South. It disappeared slowly as lard fell out of fashion and packaged cornbread mix replaced the scratch recipe. We lost something real. Number 17. Oxtail stew. In 1982, oxtail cost 99 cents a pound because Americans of European descent had not yet discovered it. This is important. Black and Caribbean families had been slow cooking oxtail for generations, drawing out the collagen and the deep, beefy richness into a stew so thick and glossy it barely resembled soup. You browned the pieces, added onion, garlic, thyme, and allspice if your family had Caribbean roots. Then let the whole thing braise for 3 hours until the meat slid off the bone and the gravy coated a spoon like velvet. Today, oxtail costs $8 a pound at the same butcher counter. Food gentrification is a whole separate video, maybe 2. Number 16. Liver and onions over rice. Beef liver cost 60 cents a pound in 1983, and most people would not touch it, which meant black families who knew how to cook it ate well for almost nothing. You soaked the liver in milk for an hour to draw out the bitterness, then dredged it in seasoned flour and pan, fried it with sliced onions until the onions went golden and soft and the liver cooked through. The pan drippings became gravy with a splash of water and a stir. Over white rice, it was a complete meal that delivered more iron, more vitamin B12, and more protein per dollar than almost anything else in the grocery store. Number 15. Hoppin John. Black-eyed peas, rice, and whatever pork product was cheapest, smoked sausage, a ham hock, fatback. Cooked together in one pot until the peas turned creamy and the rice absorbed the smoky broth. In the Carolinas, this dish was so embedded in black cultural life that it appeared on New Year's Day tables as a matter of spiritual obligation. Black-eyed peas for luck, collard greens for money, cornbread for gold. But in the 1980s, it was not just a holiday meal. It was a Wednesday night lifeline. Cheap, filling, deeply nourishing, and connected to something larger than a grocery budget. When you eat this, you are eating history. Number 14. Commodity cheese macaroni. If you were alive in the early 1980s and your family received government commodity foods, you know exactly what I'm about to say. The cheese, That 5-pound block of processed American cheese that came in a plain brown box with black stenciled letters, melted differently than anything before or since. Grandmothers. Boiled macaroni, made a simple butter and flour roux, added evaporated milk and enormous amounts of that government cheese, then baked the whole thing until the top browned and bubbled. The result was so far superior to any boxed macaroni product that the comparison is almost insulting. Children who grew up eating this still spend their adult lives trying to recreate it. None of them fully succeed. Number 13. Smothered pork chops. Thin-cut pork chops, the cheap ones, dredged in seasoned flour and pan-fried until browned on both sides. Then returned to the pan with sliced onions, a cup of water, and the pan drippings, and simmered covered on low for 45 minutes. The chops braised in their own gravy until they were fork tender and the onions had dissolved into something sweet and silky. This was Sunday dinner when the budget allowed it, and Tuesday night dinner when someone had found the chops on sale. The gravy went over rice or mashed potatoes, and every drop of it got sopped up with cornbread. Nothing on that plate was wasted. Nothing. Number 12. Pig ear sandwiches. A pig ear cost almost nothing at the butcher, sometimes 10 cents each. Most customers walked right past them. You boiled the ears for 2 hours until the cartilage softened. Then you sliced them thin and either fried the slices until crispy or served them cold with hot sauce and mustard on white bread. The flavor was mild and porky. The texture was unlike anything else, a combination of soft meat and cartilage that rewarded people who were willing to try it. This was common street food at blackfish fries and cookouts across the South, from Mississippi to Maryland. You never see it catered. You still find it at the right grandmother's house, if you are lucky enough to be invited. Number 11. Salmon croquettes. A can of pink salmon, cracker crumbs, 1 egg, diced onion, and a little black pepper, mixed together, formed into patties, and fried in oil until golden. That was the entirety of the recipe. A can of salmon cost about 89 cents in 1982. It made 6 croquettes, served with grits in the morning, or with rice and a vegetable at dinner. This was the protein that stretched the furthest for the least money. The soft bones in canned salmon added calcium most people never knew they were getting. Black mothers across the South made these every week without thinking of them as special. They were just dinner, just exactly what dinner needed to be. Number 10. Stewed tomatoes and rice. 1 large can of whole tomatoes crushed by hand. 1 cup of white rice. 1 onion diced fine. A little sugar to cut the acid. Butter, salt, black pepper. Everything into 1 pot. The tomatoes cooked down and absorbed into the rice as it cooked, turning it red and savory and slightly sweet. For less than $1, this fed 4 people a meal that tasted like something took time, even when it took 20 minutes. Some grandmothers added a can of corn, some added a crumbled piece of bacon, but the base recipe needed nothing. This dish exists almost nowhere in written form. It lived entirely in hands and in kitchens, and it is disappearing with the generation that made it. Number 9. Sweet potato pie. Yes, this is a meal. In hard times, a sweet potato pie was not dessert. It was supper for the children, before the adults figured out what the rest of the evening would hold. Sweet potatoes were cheap, filling, and packed with nutrition. A large pie cost less than $1 to produce in 1983. You boiled the potatoes, mashed them with butter, sugar, eggs, evaporated milk, vanilla, cinnamon, and nutmeg, poured the filling into a lard crust, and baked it until the top barely trembled. That custard, dense and sweet and orange, carried enough calories to hold a child through the night. Calling it dessert was technically accurate. Calling it survival food was more honest. Number 8. Chicken and dumplings. Chicken backs and necks, the cheapest parts. were simmered in a pot of water with celery, onion, and salt until the broth ran golden and the meat fell away from the bones. Then, the bones were pulled out. Spoonfuls of flour and buttermilk dough were dropped into the simmering broth. The pot was covered, and it cooked for 20 minutes without lifting the lid. The dumplings puffed into soft, pillowy clouds that absorbed the chicken broth and became something between bread and soup. For a family of 6, this pot cost less than $2, and it produced leftovers that tasted better the next day. Black grandmothers across the South made this when someone was sick, when someone was grieving, when the weather turned cold. It was the edible version of saying, "I love you and I am here." You cooked a bunch of mustard greens, collard greens, or turnip greens with a smoked ham hock in a pot of water for at least 2 hours. What remained in the pot after the greens were done was the pot liquor, a broth so deeply flavored by the greens, the pork, and the long cooking that it constituted its own medicine. Black Southerners drank pot liquor during illness for generations because it worked. Modern nutritionists confirm it is extraordinarily dense with vitamins. You crumbled cornbread directly into the pot liquor and ate the whole thing with a spoon. For approximately 60 cents, this was one of the most nutritious meals a human being could eat in 1983 or any other year. Number 6. Red Kool-Aid and a mayonnaise sandwich. I am going to be honest with you. This is not glamorous, but it is real, and it belongs on this list. A jar of mayonnaise, white bread, salt and pepper, and a pitcher of red Kool-Aid made from the off-brand packet that cost 10 cents. This was the lunch you made when your mother was at her second job and you were 12 years old and responsible for feeding yourself and your little brother. The mayonnaise gave you fat. The bread gave you carbohydrates. The Kool-Aid gave you sugar and something cold to drink on a hot afternoon. Nobody who ate this lunch called it poverty. They called it Wednesday. That honesty is part of the history too. Number 5. Pig's feet in vinegar. Pickled pig's feet were sold in large glass jars at corner stores and gas stations across black neighborhoods for decades. A single foot cost about 35 cents in 1982. You pulled one from the brine, wrapped it in a piece of white bread, and ate it standing up, walking down the street, or sitting on a porch. The vinegar brine made them tangy and bright. The meat was tender from the long brining process. The collagen in the cartilage and skin was exactly what we now pay $12 for in boutique bone broth products. The pig's feet never needed rebranding. They just needed to be remembered with the respect they deserve. Number 4. Black-eyed peas and cornbread. Simpler than Hoppin John. No rice, no sausage required. Just a pot of black-eyed peas cooked low with a piece of fatback and an onion until they turned thick and creamy, and the broth was something you would drink straight from a cup. Many people did. Cornbread baked in cast iron on the side. The combination was complete protein, complex carbohydrates, and more iron per serving than a multivitamin. A full pot cost less than $1 in 1983. This was the meal that grandmother made on the nights when the money was almost gone, but not quite. When almost gone still meant everyone ate. That is the meal you remember forever. Number 3. Smothered cabbage with smoked sausage. 1 head of cabbage, 2 smoked sausage links, 1 onion, a pat of butter, salt, purée, garlic powder, and a pinch of sugar. Everything goes into a heavy pot on medium-low heat. The cabbage cooks down from a mountain to a silky, sweet, smoky tangle. The sausage, sliced into coins, perfumes every leaf. A head of cabbage cost 49 cents. The sausage cost $1. The entire meal cost $1.49 and fed 5 people. For families who knew nothing else was coming, this pot was the whole answer to a very hard question. Modern nutritionists have confirmed what black grandmothers already knew. Cooked cabbage is extraordinarily high in vitamin C, vitamin K, and fiber. Science finally caught up. Number 2. Bread pudding. Stale bread, the older the better. Soaked in a mixture of eggs, evaporated milk, sugar, vanilla, and cinnamon. Then baked until puffed, golden, and fragrant. Bread pudding existed in Black households specifically because wasting bread was not something anyone could afford to do. The staler the bread, the better it absorbed the custard. What came out of that oven was something that no rational person would call poor food. Rich, dense, sweet, warm. A whiskey sauce if there was bourbon in the house, a vanilla drizzle if there was not. Churches served it at every fundraiser. Grandmothers brought it to every repast. It asked almost nothing and returned everything. Number 1. Sunday. Gravy, chicken over white rice. Every Black family in the 1980s had a version of this. Chicken pieces, whatever was cheapest. Backs, legs, thighs, seasoned heavily with garlic, onion powder, paprika, black pepper, seasoning salt, then browned in a skillet until the skin crisped and the fond on the bottom of the pan turned dark and fragrant. Then water was added, the pan scraped, a sliced onion dropped in, the heat reduced, and the whole thing covered and left alone for an hour. What formed was not quite soup and not quite stew. It was a thick, golden, deeply savory gravy with tender chicken pieces that fell from the bone at a touch. Poured over white rice. That was it. That was Sunday. That was the smell of a house where someone loved you. That was the meal that every person who grew up eating it spends the rest of their life trying to taste again. For less than $3, it produced something that no restaurant has ever successfully replicated because it was not about the recipe. It was about who made it and what it meant to sit down together and eat it. Here is my challenge for this week. Pick one. The smothered cabbage, the salmon croquettes, or the pinto beans with fatback. Make it from scratch on a weeknight, not from a package, not from a kit, from actual ingredients that cost almost nothing. Then sit down at a table and eat it, not on a couch, not over a sink, at a table. Because these meals were never just about survival. They were about insisting, in the face of every system designed to grind you down, that you deserved a proper meal, a set table, and the dignity of sitting down to eat it. Our ancestors knew that. Now you know it too. Tell me in the comments which one your grandmother made. I want to know if the Sunday gravy chicken gets the love it deserves.